The Quit India movement of 1942 stands as one of the most powerful and decisive uprisings in India's struggle for freedom. As World War II raged across continents, India found itself unwillingly dragged into the conflict by the British, without the consent of its own leaders. After nearly 2 centuries of colonial rule, exploitation, economic suffering, and broken promises, the patience of the Indian people was wearing thin. By the early 1940s, the freedom movement had matured, and the desire for independence had solidified into a nationwide demand. It was in this tense atmosphere that the call for a final, determined push for freedom was born. In March 1942, the British government sent Sir Stafford Cripps to India in a last-minute attempt to gain Indian support for the war. However, his proposals offered only vague promises of dominion status after the conflict ended. The Indian leadership saw this as inadequate and insincere. Mahatma Gandhi famously dismissed the offer as a post-dated check on a failing bank. The failure of the Cripps mission convinced Indians that Britain had no intention of granting genuine independence. This growing dissatisfaction, combined with the hardships caused by the ongoing war, laid the groundwork for what would become one of the most intense mass movements in Indian history. As Japan advanced through Asia and the threat of invasion loomed, Gandhi believed that India could no longer remain passive. He argued that if the British truly sought India's cooperation, they must first leave. India needed freedom to defend itself, to grow, and to stand on its own. In July 1942, after intense deliberations, the Indian National Congress decided to launch a movement demanding an immediate end to British rule. This decision culminated in the historic All India Congress Committee's powerful speech that would define the movement. He urged the nation to do or die in its mission to end British rule. The slogan, "Quit India," spread like wildfire across the nation. However, the British government responded swiftly and harshly. Within hours of the resolution, Gandhi, Nehru, Patel, Azad, and almost every senior Congress leader were arrested in a massive preemptive crackdown. Newspapers were censored, public meetings were banned, and security forces were deployed across major cities. But the British underestimated the spirit of the Indian people. Instead of stopping the movement, the arrests ignited an unprecedented wave of anger and determination. Leaderless but fearless, ordinary citizens, students, farmers, workers, and women stepped into the forefront. The Quit India movement transformed overnight into a spontaneous, decentralized revolt. Across the country, protests erupted. Strikes shut down factories and schools, and communication lines and railway tracks became targets of sabotage. As symbols of colonial control were challenged. Some regions even established local, parallel governments, refusing to accept British authority. In Balia, in Uttar Pradesh, Chitu Pandey led a brief but spirited rebellion. In Bengal, the Tamralipta national government took shape. In Maharashtra's Satara district, the Prati Sarkar resisted British rule for several years. The movement was no longer driven by speeches or resolutions. It was fueled by the collective will of millions who demanded to be free. Women played a remarkable role during this period. Their courage inspired thousands and kept the flame of the movement alive, even when communication channels were controlled by the British. The British, however, fought back with severe repression. Thousands of protesters were arrested, and hundreds lost their lives in police firing and violent clashes. Entire villages were raided, homes were burnt, and people were beaten for simply participating in the movement. Despite this brutality, the uprising continued. India had awakened, and the colonial government could no longer contain the growing unrest. Though the movement did not achieve immediate independence, it completely changed the political landscape of the country. By the end of World War II, Britain was exhausted, financially weakened, and facing strong resistance throughout India. It had become clear that British rule could not continue. The Quit India movement had unified Indians across caste, religion, region, and language in a shared mission. It showed the world that India's freedom was not just a political demand, but an unstoppable force, driven by the people themselves. The Quit India movement marked the beginning of the end of British rule in India. It was a turning point that accelerated the path to independence in 1947. More than a movement, it was a declaration of national pride, a moment when millions rose together and said, "Enough, leave, quit India." Their courage, sacrifice, and unity remain a timeless reminder of the power of collective struggle.